When you think about two of the biggest religions on the planet, Christianity and Islam, you might not realize just how much history they share. So, in this explainer, we're going to dig into that. We'll look at how they each got started, meet the key figures, and uncover this ancient family tree that actually links them together.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to start with the Roman Empire. And I mean, at its peak, this thing was a powerhouse. It wasn't just some country, it was practically the organizing principle for the entire known world. We're talking millions of soldiers, legendary engineering, and an influence that stretched across continents. It really seemed like Rome was eternal, you know? An empire built to last forever.
But what happens when an empire of swords and stone, of pure physical might, comes up against something you can't see? An idea, a faith, something you just can't crush with legions or fence in with borders. And that question, well, that's where our story really kicks off.
So, right as the foundations of Rome started to show some serious cracks, something else was happening. A totally new kind of power was on the rise. And this one wasn't about military might, it was about shared belief. A force that wouldn't just survive the empire's fall, but would actually rise up from its ashes.
Rome didn't just fall in a day. It was more like a slow, long crumble. There were pressures from the outside. You had constant invasions from nomadic tribes like the Huns, just chipping away at the borders. But honestly, the bigger change was happening on the inside. Political power was slowly, but surely, shifting over to the spiritual authority of this new Christian church.
For centuries, Rome had actively persecuted Christians. But then, you get the ultimate plot twist. The emperor himself, Constantine, converts. And look, this wasn't just some personal choice he made. This was a massive imperial endorsement. All of a sudden, the faith of the persecuted becomes the faith of the powerful. And that set the stage for Christianity to become the dominant religion of the entire Western world. But the spread of this faith, it wasn't just a top-down thing coming from emperors. No, it was carried on the ground by these incredibly passionate messengers. And maybe the most influential one of all, he actually started out as one of its greatest enemies.
So let's talk about a guy named Saul of Tarsus. This man was, he was the opposite of a follower. In fact, he was one of early Christianity's most feared opponents. He actively hunted down believers. Some accounts even say he was there when Stephen, the very first Christian martyr, was executed.
So that word, martyrdom, what does it actually mean? It's really the ultimate act of faith, being willing to die for what you believe in. Stephen's death was a huge deal for the early church, and it's just a powerful example of the kind of conviction that was fueling this whole movement.
Saul's story is, it's one of the most dramatic 180s you can possibly imagine. So he's on his way to Damascus, and the irony here is he's going there to persecute more Christians. When he has this profound, life-altering spiritual experience, it completely changes him. He ditches his old life, takes on the new name Paul, and becomes the faith's most dedicated apostle. His letters and writings ended up forming a huge chunk of what we now know as the Christian New Testament.
Of course, Paul wasn't the only one building this new faith. The early church was really built on a few key pillars. You have the foundational texts, right? The four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that tell the story of Jesus. You've got leadership from figures like St. Peter, who's considered the very first pope. And then you have missionaries like St. Patrick, who took the faith to the very edges of the known world. And eventually, this all became centralized in what we now call Vatican City.
And as the faith grew, this new way of life started to pop up, monasticism. Monks were basically guys who decided to step away from the regular world to dedicate their entire lives to prayer and religious practices. They ended up playing a super important role in preserving knowledge and spirituality through the ages.
All right, now we're going to hit the fast-forward button and jump ahead several centuries. And we're also changing locations. We're heading to the Arabian Peninsula. In this really vibrant landscape of trade routes and ancient traditions, another world-changing monotheistic faith was about to be born.
So the story of Islam really begins with one man, Muhammad, who was born back in the 6th century. And you can see on this timeline, the key moment happens in the early 600s. A pilgrimage he takes to the city of Mecca, it would kick off a chain of events that was going to change the world forever.
It was in a cave, just outside Mecca, where Muhammad is said to have received his very first divine revelation from God.
And these messages, which were delivered to him over his lifetime, were eventually compiled into what became the Quran, the holy book of Islam.
Now, the source material also brings up the term jihad, and while you often hear it translated today simply as holy war, its meaning is actually pretty complex. In Islamic tradition, yeah, it can refer to an external struggle to defend the faith, but it can also, and this is often seen as more important, refer to the internal, personal struggle to live a good and virtuous life.
Okay, so we've traced how they started out separately, but here's where the storylines converge. This is the big reveal. Christianity and Islam, for all their differences, actually sprang from the very same root. They share a common ancestor.
And that common ancestor is Abraham. This is why you'll often hear Christianity and Islam referred to as Abrahamic religions. It's a whole family of faiths that also includes Judaism. They all look back to the patriarch Abraham as a foundational prophet.
So, if they share a common ancestor, where do the paths split? It's a great question. While all three faiths honor Abraham, they follow a different lineage. Judaism and Christianity trace their spiritual heritage through Abraham's son, Isaac. Islam, on the other hand, traces its lineage through Abraham's other son, Ishmael. And that's the key point of divergence.
Okay, so let's pull all this together. It's time to look at the core foundational elements of these two incredible world religions, side by side. This table really lays it all out nicely, doesn't it? On one side, you've got Christianity, centered on Jesus Christ, with its holy book, the Bible, and a major center of authority in the Vatican. Then on the other side, you have Islam, centered on the Prophet Muhammad, with its holy book, the Quran, and its most sacred city, Mecca. Two very distinct paths, but both branching out from a single ancient root.
So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? Well, it's that these aren't just stories from some dusty old history book. They are the living, breathing foundational narratives for literally billions of people today. They've shaped civilizations, inspired art, and guided politics for centuries. Which leaves us with one final big question. How do these ancient stories of revelation and conversion continue to shape the world we're all living in, right here, right now?